Welcome to the Fully Charged Show podcast. Yes, you are right, I am not Robert, nor my Johnny, nor Maddie, or Helen, or indeed Chelsea Sexton. My name is Benjamin Bruton-Cox, and I am the podcast producer. So why you hear my voice instead of anybody else's? Well, quite simply, Robert is all in rubber. I think Origin fans would know what I mean by that. And Johnny is off somewhere exotic. We never really know where he is. He's our international man of mystery. And everybody else, quite frankly, has other work commitments, so I'm afraid it's me hosting for this week. In this live talk at Fully Charged Live on Saturday the 9th of June, Maddie Moat speaks to three experts about electric vehicles myths busted. So on stage, Maddie welcomes Elinor Chalmers from EVA Scotland, Graeme Cooper from the National Grid, and Euan McTurk from Dukosi. So let's all get confirmation finally that EVs can indeed get wet.
Welcome to Electric Vehicle Myths Busted. Apparently last year this session was a bit of a giggle. I think it's an opportunity for people who already own electric vehicles to have a bit of a grumble and a groan and sort of go, yeah, we've heard that one before so many times. But also it's an opportunity for everybody here who's completely new to EVs to just find out a bit more information. So I'd love to welcome my lovely panellists. Can you please put your hands together for Elinor Chalmers from EVA Scotland. We've got Graeme Cooper from National Grid. Hey. And we've got Euan McTurk from Dukosi. Actually, the two of you are related, aren't you?
We are, yeah, we're cousins.
You and Elinor are cousins, so there we go. I guess to get this started, I mean, everyone in the panel has come up with a myth or something that they have heard time and time again. And the idea is that we're going to finally bust those myths. But just so we get a sense of who we're talking to, guys. Hands up if you already have an electric vehicle and are here just to have a giggle. Okay, quite a few. All right then. Okay. And hands up if you would like to own an electric vehicle but don't know anything about it. All right, okay. So I think the point here is that a lot of the myths that we're going to mention probably were actually true back in like 2011, I think we could say. But things have moved on. Lots has changed. Technology has moved forward. So I think we can talk about that progression, because for every myth that we talk about and that we can disprove, once upon it's come from somewhere, and I think that's a point that we need to get across. So if you've got any myths of your own, maybe save them for later, because it'd be great to take some from the audience as well. But I'm going to kick things off with, this is a big one, and I'm going to ask you, Graeme. I'm going straight to you, if that's all right. So, electric vehicles.
Yes.
We all had an electric vehicle tomorrow.
Yes.
Could the grid cope?
Do you want the short answer or the long answer? The short answer is yes.
Okay.
However,
Can you give me the medium answer?
I'll try and give you the medium answer. So, if you think about, the peak demand on our electricity system was about 2002. And we've all been putting solar panels on our roofs and getting lower, more efficient technology since then. So energy demand has actually fallen about 16% since 2002. If we all went to electric vehicles tomorrow, it only goes back up 10%. So it's fallen 16, then goes back up 10. That's okay.
Okay. And if I was to ask you to take your National Grid hat off, what would you say as a consumer?
So the interesting thing for me is I've got two EVs. I've got a plug-in hybrid and a battery electric vehicle. I've also got ground source heat pumps, so I'm a big energy user. The challenge will be, looking long-term as a consumer, is that my energy bills are driven by the cost of networks and energy. But at the moment, we have peaks in the day, and that's not the most efficient way to use networks and energy. If we can smooth that, you get lots of efficiency. So what we need to do is have smarter charging and then eventually smarter heating so that we don't add to that winter evening peak.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for taking that one on. I appreciate it. You mentioned charging just there, smart charging. I think a lot of the myths, especially Elinor, that you've come up against, is that people are concerned about how they are going to charge their cars and also how much they have to charge their cars as well. So the first myth I'm going to give you, Elinor, can you be an EV owner and live in an apartment block?
Well, I found myself in that scenario myself. I'm very fortunate to stay in the city of Dundee. Anyone in from Dundee? No?
Oh, thank you, sir.
And when I first moved to Dundee, I kept seeing all these funny boxes popping up everywhere. And there was these car clubs and the taxis were using them. And my deal on my previous car was coming up for renewal. And a certain cousin of mine was telling me that I should drive electric. So I was a bit like, oh, charging, what am I going to do about that? But as I said, I kept seeing all these boxes, and I'm very fortunate that also that part of my week I work at the University of Dundee, who've got workplace chargers, and said that the local charging infrastructure as well, that I think everybody's really focused on charging at home, whereas the out and about, you spend, like your car sitting doing nothing at work, or with all the supermarkets bringing them in, it can be there. And it doesn't have to be rapid chargers, it can be your Type 2s, even a 3-pin plug at the end of the day. With a little bit of foresight, I said it doesn't have to be at your own doorstep.
So actually it's just about educating yourself.
Oh,
Do
definitely.
a bit of research, because actually the nearest charge point to you might be your local gym, or it might be the supermarket, and actually it's not being used and it's there for you.
Yeah, like the statistics are, I know in Scotland anyway, that from any point that there's a charger within 2.78 miles of every possession. I think south of the border it's slightly more at 4. But if you think about it, go on ZapMap, go on PlugShare, you'd be amazed. There's more charging points in the UK than there are petrol stations, so they're out there.
Okay. All right, Euan, what's the biggest myth or what's a bugbear that you have that you get asked a lot of the time?
Well, as a battery electrochemist, people keep asking me, are we going to run out of materials to make lithium-ion batteries?
Are we going to run out of materials to make batteries? Okay. And what would your answer be to that?
We're definitely not. I mean, lithium-ion batteries are the mainstay for now. There's 14 million tons of lithium on land. And if that's not enough, there's 230 billion tons of lithium in the sea. So we could take as much as we need and barely change the ocean's composition. Also, lithium-ion batteries are only 7% lithium by weight. It's not like lead acid, where lead is one of the main components. It's actually surprisingly little lithium in a lithium-ion battery.
But if lots of people are asking you the same question, are we going to run out of materials? Clearly, this thought has come from somewhere. So why do people think that?
I'm honestly not too sure. I think there's just been a lot of uncertainty in the media. People have been looking at older versions of the lithium-ion battery as well. One of the other materials that keeps coming up is cobalt. And 10 years ago, a lithium-ion battery was about, well, the positive electrode in a lithium-ion battery was about 40% cobalt. And we've actually slashed that content by 90% over the last decade. We're down to 4%, and that number continues to decline. So there've been a lot of worries about cobalt mines, particularly in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, but cobalt in lithium-ion batteries is gradually being phased out. In fact, it's being very rapidly phased out, I should say, and it's not going to be too long before we have high energy density, cobalt-free lithium-ion batteries.
Do you want to hop in there? I thought you might.
Yeah, I also think as the market grows and businesses who are supplying the batteries, they are looking at their supply chain and making sure it's ethical and responsible. You know, everything is auditable. So when you see these sort of pictures of children in muddy holes, and they may have been there years and years ago, that's sort of black market stuff. But of course the trouble is that's what grabs headlines. When you actually look at the businesses making batteries and look at their ethical statements and the traceability, you'll actually find that all of these responsible businesses are actually doing responsible mining with proper terms and conditions, but then that doesn't sell papers. People love a good scare story.
Okay. You mentioned supply there, and I think something that I hear quite a lot, and I think, Graeme, this is one for you as well, is that surely all electric vehicles are just powered by dirty coal generation.
Yeah, that's a really good one. You only have to look at the press in the last 2 weeks. We've had just over 2 weeks of no coal running on the grid system. Now, that is the first time we've had 2 weeks with no coal making electricity since 1888, right? Since the start of the Industrial Revolution. Prior to that,
you can give that a clap.
I mean,
There's some people clapping in the
that's
back.
pretty good,
right?
right?
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that's important is National Grid doesn't make electricity. We don't decide the technology. We just supply the wires to get it to the right place, right? So what's nice is the market is moving to cleaner technology by itself with the right sort of guidance, you know, the Paris Agreement, climate change objectives. It's moving in the right way. So we at the moment, still have 7 coal power stations on the system, I think. And by 2025, likely to be 0.
But even then, I also think that people forget about the pollution problem as well. Because actually, if when you take power stations, there are some ways we can deal with the carbon emissions. But if you've got lots of cars out on the road and each of them have some sort of pollution trail, then that is really hard to manage and really bad for the environment.
Yeah, definitely. But what's nice is if you think about the car park of electric cars that's growing, when was the last time we had a technology that got cleaner every day? I mean, this is what's nice. It's getting cleaner every day. The other myth associated with the emissions on the car is not just the associated with energy. People talk about sort of particulates from brake pads. In an electric car, you almost never use your brakes because the motor becomes a generator and slows you down.
It's very strange. I actually drove on for the first time last week. It was an i3, and it was the first time I'd experienced not needing to brake, and it was really weird, but also awesome. It was fun. It was different.
But it becomes natural.
Yeah.
What scared me is I had to pick up my brother from the airport last week, and he said, just borrow my diesel Passat. I got to the end of the road, took my foot off the accelerator and panicked because it didn't slow down. That was a moment, but it's one of those things that you suddenly realise it becomes normal. I mean, it's almost like Scalextrics. Squeeze to go, let go to stop.
I've got one here that might seem utterly ridiculous, but I thought I would include it because I have heard it a few times. And that is, you can't take an electric vehicle through a car wash. Hey! But you know what? This has come from somewhere, though. There is a reason. That people are nervous about the relationship between EVs and water and rain as well. You can't charge in the rain. That's another one. Do you want to take that one, Eleanor?
Yeah, no, I'd been asked that a few times myself, and I actually did a little Periscope video of me going through the car wash just to prove that I didn't get electrocuted in the process.
So is that one just pure myth? Has there ever been a point within the history of EVs that you couldn't?
Well, no, because anything that is designed to go onto the road has to go through so many different automotive regulations, and that includes waterproofing of any high voltage or low voltage electrical equipment. So, I mean, I think Nissan pretty much categorically disprove the EVs and water don't mix myth back when the Leaf was first unveiled, actually, because there's a Japanese video of them testing it, and they drive it through a Ford, and it's a pretty darn deep Ford. And it comes out the other side quite happy.
So this is me showing my age, right?
Okay.
My first electric car that I observed was a Sinclair C5.
Oh.
You wouldn't want to take one of those through the car wash,
Oh, really?
not because of the technology, because you'd get really wet.
Oh, right, okay. So what about this myth about not being able to charge in the rain? Like, is there a problem with charge points? They're like, no?
Oh no, it's all waterproof. It's
okay.
Very thoroughly designed.
What about the actual chargers themselves? Am I right in thinking that you need to leave them in a certain way so rain can't get in them? Is that a myth?
If it's something with a tethered cable, typically they'll have a holster which will keep them nice and dry. Obviously, if someone has not tethered it properly and just left it on the ground, then you'd want to make sure it had a good shake. Make sure it's nice and dry. But really, I mean, it's just such a robust charging system that it will cope with that. Obviously, if it's under 6 foot of flood water, don't do that. But if it's just a wee bit of rain, shake it off, it'll be fine.
When it comes to charging, I've got quite a fun one here, which is someone asked, do you not worry about not charging up to 100% every night? So there seems to be some kind of anxiety that you have to leave the house with 100%, otherwise the world's going to end. What do you say? What would you say to someone who asked you that?
I think my car is very rarely at 100%, again, because I'm not topping it up at home. But like the majority of people across the UK, my commute is well under 20 miles. And I've got a 2015 24 kilowatt Nissan Leaf, so I'll maybe only have to charge it a couple of times a week if I'm doing my standard runaround. And, well, Euan would probably fill you in properly about the battery on going up to 100%, but I said it's not something that I feel I need to do on a daily basis unless I've got a particularly long trip, and I'll plan for that. So
should you? Is it good practice?
Well, I think actually in practice, it's good to take the battery up to fully charged every so often, maybe once every week or two. And that balances all the individual cells in the battery pack. So it makes sure all the individual cells that make up the battery are brought up to the same voltage so they don't go out of whack over time. But that, these days, lithium-ion cells the production quality is so good that they tend to rise and fall as one anyway. The voltage on them tends to rise and fall as one. But it's also advantageous to just run the car between the states of charge that you see fit, whatever fits in with your daily routine. Because I think a prime example of that is a 24 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf, just like Elinor and I have, very famous one called Whizzy. There was a taxi down in Cornwall, and that was rarely taken up to 100% and lovingly charged and balanced and looked after properly. It was rapid charged all the time. Rapid charging is bad for the battery, apparently. But that car, after 100,000 miles, still had all of the 12 state of health bars that the Leaf has on. It shows you how much of the capacity still remains in the battery. It was retired as a taxi after 174,000 miles. And incidentally, the only issue with it, the only failure on it was one ball bearing. Name one petrol or diesel car that can claim that. People look at the lithium-ion battery in their smartphone, in their laptop. That typically lasts 3-ish years, and then it's dead. And they assume that the same is going to apply to an electric car, but it won't, because it's first of all a different chemistry of lithium-ion. In fact, the smartphones and the laptops are still using lithium cobalt oxide, which is 40% cobalt. So there's considerably more cobalt in the smartphones and laptops of people who say, EVs use a lot of cobalt, than there is in EVs. But on top of that, the thermal management and the battery management, the control electronics keep electric vehicle batteries in brilliant condition for so much longer. And it's a different operating environment as well, because an electric vehicle, particularly in an environment like here, will run between 30 degrees and minus 10 degrees ambient temperature. Lithium-ion batteries, the optimum for them is about 25 degrees. That's the ultimate trade-off between performance and degradation. Whereas a smartphone lives in your pocket, 37 degrees C, run some apps, it will go above 50. And then with laptops, the processor's 90 degrees C on it before it starts to throttle back. So the heat that's exposed to, combined with poorer control electronics, means that consumer electronics die quickly, but EVs last a lot longer.
Okay, you'll hop in there.
Yeah, but even if your EV battery is maybe coming towards the end of its life for powering an EV, they have got a second life. There's a fantastic charging hub facility just down the road from where my flat is, and they've got all the hubs lined with solar panels. And obviously, if nobody's charging at the time, they have this big box full of XEV batteries that are storing that all up. So they may have lost a little bit of their health, but they've still got this other life.
Still useful.
Yeah.
But I also think, we speak to the people in the car industry, but we're an energy business, so it's a bit of a strange one talking to people who are not in our sector. But they have an obligation to make the car as much recyclable as possible. So they actually have an obligation to do something with the battery after the life of the car. So you're already seeing the likes of Nissan, who will sell you solar panels for the roof, their equivalent of the Powerwall. Well, most of the cells in that are going to be ex-Nissan Leaf batteries. So you could end up, the next electric car you buy, you could use it for 100,000 miles, or whatever is the life of it, and then someone will take the battery away, stick it in a shiny box, and you can stick it on the garage wall or under the cupboard under the stairs. That will then actually help you make you be more sustainable, and actually almost takes you to a point of energy democracy, right? Up until now, energy bills just hit you at the end of the month or quarter. But if you can generate on the roof, store it in the cupboard under the stairs, charge your EV, actually you're an active participant in the whole energy process. Now, some people want to really geek out on the apps, but other people will want that to just happen automatically. So it doesn't matter what level you want to get involved, you can. And that's exciting.
That's exactly what I find really exciting, that actually, you can start off with an electric vehicle, but really that's an entry point to a whole network of systems that are going to benefit you later on. So you start with your car, and then you go for solar panels, and then it's the battery.
It's an addiction.
Oh, really? Okay.
Must have more green tech.
Really? Well, you can answer for that. You're decked out.
I can tell you, well, other than solar panels, because I live in a listed building, so the conservation people won't let me put panels on, but I started with an old house on an oil boiler, and it was brutal. So in renovating the house, we put in 28 kilowatts of ground source heat. So my garden now heats my house. So 1 kilowatt of electrical energy in gives me 4 kilowatts of heat. That's pretty good. Then I have 2 electric cars, a plug-in hybrid and a full battery electric car. We then get to a point now where I even treat all my own wastewater on site. So the only thing that leaves my house is clean water. So actually, I'm now at a point where I live in a 600-year-old house that's carbon neutral. So if I can do it in a really rickety old listed building with all the obligations around that, everybody can do something. You don't have to do all of that, but everybody can do something.
Yeah.
But the neat thing for me that I realise is I was busy talking about batteries and power walls. But the biggest load on your home is heat.
Yeah, so interestingly, actually, I did a panel this morning. Was anybody in the panel that I did this morning? No? So we were saying, okay, so a few people, that actually one of the very first things that you should do to your home before you start investing in loads of really expensive tech, let's be honest, actually is just work out how drafty your house is and fill in the gaps.
Do you know one of the neatest thing you can do is most council environmental departments have infrared cameras. You can borrow those. You put your credit card down to make sure you don't steal it, but you can borrow one. Just pointed at your house on a cool evening, you will see where you're hemorrhaging energy. Work on that.
Yeah. Just to bring it back to cars for a second, we sort of went off on a tangent there. Let's talk about range anxiety. I won't bother trying to, show you let you hear the recordings, but both Helen and Johnny are fed up with people saying, electric vehicles, aren't they just those electric toy-like cars and they can only do about 50 miles and then you get stranded? And it's just frustrating, really frustrating. Where has this rumour come from? Go on, Euan.
Oh, fair enough. People are just used to petrol cars being able to do a few hundred miles per charge. But as was pointed out in a previous talk, the irony is that the people who are complaining about range anxiety for electric vehicles are the people who probably only put about a quarter of a tank of fuel into their car at any one point. And so many people run out of petrol at the side of the road because they've pushed it too far. Whereas with an electric vehicle, it will give you a heck of a lot of warning when it gets to a fairly low charge. And even when it reaches 0%, chances are it's still got a bit of reserve in there. In fact, didn't Robert Llewellyn himself deliberately run his leaf flat and he took forever to do it? Yeah, go.
I've got a really good stat. We talk about range anxiety. Do you know, on average, every day, how many people run out of petrol and diesel?
Oh, I don't know.
Just running out. And that's when you've got a big needle and a yellow light. 2,100 people every day.
No.
This is a stat by Green Flag. 2,100 people every day just run out of petrol or diesel. So range anxiety...
Do you have a comparison? Do you have a comparison with how often this happens to EVs?
No, not really.
Regardless, okay.
Because the thing is, I think it's not actually range anxiety, it's experience anxiety.
Yeah.
So I did 567 miles about a month ago in one day in my car that has a real-world range of 200 miles. I made it. It was okay. The challenge that you have, though, is that was 9 hours driving. That was actually 4 hours charging. So
did you feel a little bit squeaky at any point? Like this
it's
is getting bad.
But the one thing I'll tell you, and this is what people most forget about, a lot of us will charge at home and charge at work. We do need more rapid chargers at strategic points when you're doing out-of-pattern journeys. But one of the things you realise is this is not about cars and it's not about energy. Everybody in the room has a 200-mile range bladder. So if you're going to stop for a bathroom break, you might as well charge the car, right? And this is the bizarre thing. We can do all the engineering, we can do all the clever tech, we can do all the political stuff. You're going to stop every 200 miles for a bathroom break. So that's your experience anxiety.
Okay, but let's say you have to stop the car because you need a bathroom break, so you might as well charge it. What is the infrastructure there, though? What if you get there and the charger just doesn't work? Because people are genuinely worried about it. And I think that's a grumble that I've heard all across this weekend. And I actually think this isn't a myth, this one. I think there is progress to be made.
My thing is I'll use quite a lot of the apps out there and plan a longer journey. There's a really good one called WhatsApp that does like live updates and it'll come up whether it's working or not, and the other one's nearby. So if you're into EVs, you're probably a bit of a tech geek. So there's so many apps there to help you along the way.
I just think I think it's a case of normalizing it. I think at the moment we can say, we're all nerds in this room, like we're tech geeks, we like this stuff, but actually we want this to be normal. So I think it's just about educating people. And, today we're very much sort of like having a laugh at all of these myths that seem silly to people that understand the world. But to a lot of people, this is completely new information. And it's our job as people who are passionate and interested and nerdy to encourage those people to ask questions and not feel stupid and maybe persuade them to consider an EV for themselves. So I think it'd be great to hear from the audience now, actually. So do you have an EV myth that either you want busting because you genuinely want an answer to it, or it's something that you've heard and you think it's a bit funny and we should share it? Okay, I'm actually going to go to the gentleman over here first.
If you have a family with quite an old car, which has probably got 5 more years of life in it, why should they keep that running or switch to an EV? What would be the overall sort of CO2 impact of doing one or the other?
I can't help you on the CO2 impact, but I went from a 11-year-old 100,000 mile Volvo and looked at how much I was spending on petrol every month. That is what I'm spending on leasing my car, and I'm driving around in a brand new electric car. So the one thing I'd say is, do the maths. Don't look at the upfront cost of the car. Up until the car I have now, I've always bought 3-year-old ex-company cars, and I've just driven them until the wheels dropped off. Think about the overall life cost, because I've run now my car for 20,000 miles. It's cost me 1.2p a mile to run, which means my only cost is that monthly lease cost, and someone else is taking the risk. So I can't tell you on the CO2, but this is bigger than CO2. This is air quality, environmental health, carbon emissions. There's a lot of embedded carbon in your car, but at the same time, the answer for you won't be the answer for everybody in the room. People are driven by their own challenge.
Thank you. Make this one quick, just so we can get more questions in. That'd be great.
Just to answer the CO2 point, I did some calculations based on my Leaf and based on a Mark 1 Honda Insight, which I also have. It's now 18, 19 years old. It's one of the most efficient cars on the road, 70 miles per gallon without even trying. The Leaf is still less carbon intensive than the Insight.
Microphone, you're coming your way.
Hello, yeah. A question for Graeme. Going back to the National Grid supplying, obviously you don't produce power, but the 5 or 7 coal-fired power stations that are being wrapped up by 2025, that's got to be replaced by something. I know that wind seems to be on the march, and you see lots of offshore wind patterns out now at sea, and that seems to be running at quite a pace. Does the green energy march, is that going to account for the retired power stations in 7 years' time?
Graeme?
Yeah, so firstly, I'm going to have to declare interest here. Before I joined National Grid, I built £500 million worth of wind farms in Scotland, right? So I come from a wind energy background. Firstly, government has done a sector deal with offshore wind, so there's a lot of offshore wind, a great number of offshore wind farms that you're not seeing yet, which will get built out over that period. You've got new nuclear coming on stream at Hinkley Point. You've got more interconnection with places like Norway. So there's not a magic bullet for the transition to weaning ourselves off coal and gas and going cleaner. Multiple things need to happen. The one thing I will direct you to is the electricity system operator part of National Grid, the guys that balance supply and demand, every year produce a thing called the FES, Future Energy Scenarios. They look at what does the landscape look like for energy, both on the consumption side and how is that met out for 30 years. So if you Google FES, Future Energy Scenarios, there are 4 extremes. One of them is the do nothing. What does this look like? And the other one is we achieve all our Paris climate change targets. It's really interesting to see what is the pull from what needs power and how do we believe that's met. And the guys at the electricity system operator challenge 465 industry specialists to gain that insight. It's not what National Grid thinks, it's what 465 specialists think. So that's a good starting point. It's a bit of a geeky industry document, but they could do a really good executive summary, and that will answer all of that.
Graeme, what was that website again?
Future Energy Scenarios, FES, Future Energy Scenarios.
Okay, thank you so much. Time for one more question.
I like the myth that you have to throw away the batteries after 3 years, because I'm here with a Tesla Model S that's actually 5 years old, and I'm from Germany. And the myth is, what about all the blind people that get killed by the silent electric cars?
The answer is you can hear them. I mean, one of my sad party pieces is I can hear a Nissan Leaf coming from behind me from 100 meters, because they make they make that the pedestrian noise. The Zoe has more of a sort of spaceshipy sound. All of them have it. Incidentally, it's my first electric car, which was from 1999, which didn't have it, where you had to be a bit more careful. But everything nowadays has pedestrian warning noises at low speeds.
So although electric cars are quiet, over above about 28 miles an hour, the noisiest thing is the tyre touching the tarmac. So actually, the concern around risk is less than about 30 miles an hour. But hang about, cyclists are running around at 15, 17 miles an hour. I think it's one of those things that some people fear that there is something to fear. Let us explore that together.
I mean, Norway are managing all right, and they're doing really, really well when it comes to uptake of EVs. I think that's it. We didn't have any more myths coming from the audience. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming. I hope you're enjoying Fully Charged Live. Is anyone here tomorrow as well? Yeah, we've got some weekenders. Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us. Can I have a huge round of applause for the panellists, please? Thank you so much.
Thank you to all our panellists with this talk. We all hope this particular episode can be shared with your knowledge-hungry EV wannabe friends. So why not share this podcast to your favourite social thing and spread the good word so we don't have to answer these stupid questions anymore. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star rating and review on your favourite podcast player, as it helps us get discovered and increases our reach to spread the sustainability message. And finally, don't forget to subscribe to our 2 YouTube channels, which includes Fully Charged Regen, which has these talks in video form. To get more information about this topic or anything else Fully Charged, why not check out our amazing new glorious website at allthewsfullycharged.show. And why not have a gander at our fabulous A to Z guide? We also have a selection of sustainable merch on there too. And don't worry, all sales profits go straight back into making the show better. And we save the best till last. A huge thank you to all our Patreon supporters. Without your help, we simply wouldn't exist. The lights would be off, nobody would be home, Robert would be quiet. So thank you so much. We literally worship the ground you walk on. Thank you. So if you have been, thank you for listening.